Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited, E-Steam The Sands of Time. It's action and adventure in ancient Egypt in this terrific teen time travel romance. Get your copy of E-Steam The Sands of Time at your favorite online bookseller today.
This Sunday, I got the displeasure of watching all three of the early DC Cinematic Universe movies on TBS. And after watching all three of these DC Cinematic Universe movies on TBS, I can honestly say that Zack Snyder should never be allowed ever to direct another superhero movie again. Because your Zack Snyder clearly does not understand what it means to be a superhero, nor does he understand what the genre of superhero film is. And I can honestly say that just after watching all three of his muddled, dark, dreary, and jumbled movies. Now, the first movie I had the displeasure of watching was your Zack Snyder's Man of Steel. And I can honestly understand why many comic fans call this the Man of Stool, because this film is nothing but crap. Because there's nothing here that gives you any semblance of who Superman was in the comics, nor is there anything in this story that is true to Superman's character. Now, when I look at your Superman 1978, which starred the late, great Christopher Reeve, I saw the heart, soul, and spirit of the Superman character on screen in that film. And I saw that all because that character represented the hope of Superman, the optimism of Superman, and the love that Superman had. And that film really did a great job of showing that Superman's core values were instilled in him by your Jonathan and Martha Kent, and that the relationship between Clark and Jonathan was one of the key things that defined Superman's mission for helping people. Now, with this other Man of Steel film, we don't get that. Instead, we get this craven, scared, afraid, as I see it, beta version of Jonathan Kent, who is out to keep his son from going out here into the world and actualizing his potential as a man. He feels that he has to keep his powers a secret, and he has to keep from doing the right thing just to protect himself. And that's not who Jonathan Kent would want his son to be, from what I've read in the comics, nor would it be something that Jonathan Kent would want to instill in his son. No, your Jonathan Kent always wanted to instill in his son that if with these great powers, he should serve others, and he should go out of his way to protect and serve others from those who are a threat. And when I saw your Jonathan Kent in that tornado telling his son to stop, that was completely out of character for Jonathan Kent. Just like when he told his son not to stop, after he saved all the kids on the school bus, he admonishes him. That's just out of character for Jonathan Kent. And as I watched this film, I was just really disgusted with the total mistreatment of the Superman character and the Superman story. And there were so many plot holes in this story, it wasn't funny. So you're going to tell me after going to school, you're going to have your Clark Kent just drifting around, and he's just this beta male just drifting around at all of these different odd jobs, and he's not going to have any focus. I mean, it's clear to me that your Zack Snyder is not pulling anything from the great Man of Steel miniseries that John Byrne created, where he showed that your Clark Kent was a man who decided to use his skills as superpowers as a way to hone himself as a basketball and football star, and then he used those scholarships to go to college and then majored in journalism. But instead of doing that, we get this drifter who goes around, wandering around, trying to figure out who he is. Again, beta male tendencies in Superman, and all of a sudden, because he's drifting, all of a sudden he finds the Fortress of Solitude, he finds Lois Lane, and the way the story is so structured in your Zack Snyder's Man of Steel, it is extremely jumbled. There is no real focus, there is no real direction. Everything is just all over the place, and again, because everything is so jumbled, I don't see anything as related to who Superman is, or what Superman wants to do with his great powers, or why should I care. And the way your Zod is thrown in to this story is just very sloppily done. And when I look at this film, I just don't see anything that gives you any sort of hope or optimism. The entire film is dark, dreary, and depressing, and that's just not who Superman is. Because when I think of Superman, when I think of the Man of Steel, I think of a man who represents the very best of America. And I did not see the very best of America in this Man of Steel film. And I saw a very dark America, a very paranoid America, a very angry America, and I saw a character with powers, but I did not see any of Superman's hope, optimism, or positive energy, the things that make Superman Superman in Man of Steel. No, all I saw was just an angry man who was just wandering through life looking for some sort of purpose. And then I saw all of these gigantically overdone battle scenes, because one of the things I liked about the Richard Donner films was that he always focused on, one, verisimilitude, and two, he always focused on less is more. And because he did less in terms of special effects, we believed a man could fly. But in this film, it's hard to believe a man could fly because there's so much being thrown at the viewer in terms of special effects. They just overdo it, and it just overwhelms you. All of the destroyed buildings, all of the just carnage. And again, this does not fit within the character of Superman. When Superman goes out here, he tries to minimize damage, he tries to minimize injury, and he tries to, again, do what is best to protect the people. So when I looked at those buildings collapsing and all of that devastation and ruin, again, that is not who Superman is. Superman would never allow a city to get devastated like that if he was in the middle of a fight. He would do everything in his power to try to steer that fight far, far away from people, and he would, again, try to minimize the damage so that he could protect people. I mean, it's clear to me your Zack Snyder never read a Superman comic, and he did not know anything about the Superman character, because when I saw Clark becoming the reporter at the end of the story, that's something that made me shake my head, because, again, how can you become a reporter when you have no college degree and you have no internship experience? And again, this is stuff that John Byrne fixed in the Man of Steel story to make it relatable to today, and it's stuff that made the character work in today's storytelling. You're going to tell me this guy who's just been out there drifting, he's just going to pop up one day and become a reporter with no sort of skills? It just does not wash. After all this city has been destroyed, it just doesn't wash. Now, the weak foundation for your Superman Man of Steel, that is what leads into the rickety structure that they built called Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. And that film completely collapses under a weight of incredibly bad writing and horrific direction and incredibly bad dialogue and incredibly terrible special effects. Now, this film is a complete and unmitigated disaster, and it's one that I honestly believe is one of the worst superhero films ever made. Now, Zack Snyder's dark, dreary, depressing vision, he thinks that this is going to segue into a Justice League film, him having Batman fight Superman, but again, we get another jumbled, directionless film with absolutely no focus, no plot, no character development, and overcompensates with so much special effects that it just hurts your eyes to watch this film. Everything builds into this ridiculous climax with Superman and this Doomsday, and this Doomsday monster. This whole thing just, it's ridiculous to watch. It looks like Superman fighting silly putty, and the whole thing just never really comes together to form a cohesive film. It just looks like there's nothing but desperation on that screen, because when I look at that Batman v Superman, I look at Warner Brothers looking at Marvel Studios and getting desperate for a win. And this film is nothing but a huge loss for your DC cinematic universe, and it was the thing that literally collapsed the DC cinematic universe. This film is so poorly put together. It's just not funny, and it's one of the worst films in the superhero genre, next to Halle Berry's Catwoman, Batman and Robin, and Batman Forever. It's just absolutely terrible, and everything about it, from the battles with Superman and Doomsday to the final scenes, is just an unwatchable film. And sadly, I managed to stomach it because I have a high tolerance for bad films. I mean, I'm the guy who has sat through Plan 9 from Outer Space. I've sat through numerous ABC made-for-TV movies on Channel 7 late at night, and I have sat through some absolutely terrible films, and Batman v Superman is now in the top 5 of absolutely horrifically bad films. Now, even worse than Batman v Superman is your Suicide Squad, and your Suicide Squad is another jumbled hot mess. I mean, this film, it's supposed to take place after Batman v Superman, but this film is another just complete disaster. You have DC, again, showing how desperate it is by trying to rush out all of these villains, and then we get the plot hole of the Suicide Squad, and you have Captain Boomerang, and he's taking on the Flash. But then we get that Justice League, who comes a little later on, where we see the origin of the Flash. So which came first? The Flash's origin or the Flash taking on Captain Boomerang? So we have a plot hole in your Suicide Squad, and all of John Ostrander's great work in the comic doesn't stay true to it. This film does not stay true to John Ostrander's great writing in the Suicide Squad comic. Instead, we get this incredibly, again, jumbled film. And as I see it, Zack Snyder's vision for DC superheroes, it's clear to me he doesn't really understand what superheroes are all about. Superhero films should be light, they should be fun, they should be optimistic, they should make people want to come out and want to see more. But after I watch these superhero films from Zack Snyder, again, all I see is a dark, dreary, depressing vision, these dark visuals, these jumbled special effects, these plot points that are all over the place. There's no one straight line. There is no real character development. All the characters are one-dimensional. There's no real personality that stands out in any of his films. I mean, his Superman is very dry and bland. His Batman is just a grumbling, mumbling mess. His Wonder Woman is just kind of there. And his Suicide Squad, none of these characters even though they're bad guys, make you like them, make you care about them, or even make you want to engage with them. The whole thing is, it's hard to watch anything in his films because they are so dark and dreary, and they're just, again, no fun at all to watch. And after watching them, I started to see very serious problems in addition to the very dark, jumbled visuals and very cluttery special effects. I saw the biggest problem with its films, and it's the passive storytelling. And this is a big problem with not only your Zack Snyder, but even some of these MCU films, is passive storytelling. Now, in passive storytelling, what writers want to do is they want to try to get as many details of the story in by telling you what happens. Unfortunately, when you are in a movie, people want you to show them what happens. And when you watch Zack Snyder's films, he tells you what happens, and telling us takes us out of the film and doesn't give us a reason to care about what we're seeing. When you have active storytelling, you have a reason to get engaged, you have a reason to become compelled, and when you have an active story model, people get into the film faster. Now, with your Zack Snyder's films, because he uses the passive story model and tells us instead of shows us, it's hard to get into any of his films, and this is a core reason why the DC Cinematic Universe failed. It failed because your Zack Snyder just came in here with this dark vision, and then he tried to apply a passive story model in a genre where you need to be active. And then, instead of him trying to create a better story model, he overcompensates by throwing all of these special effects at you and hoping you will be oohing and ahhing at the special effects, but that does not stop anything, because what happens is you're not engaged because the story is incredibly weak. And when it comes down to these DC Cinematic Universe films, they are all incredibly weak, all due to your Zack Snyder just not knowing how to apply the right story model to them. Because, again, superhero movies need to be active. When you watch Raimi's Spider-Man, when you watch Iron Man from Jon Favreau, you see active superheroes. You see Peter Parker starting out with Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, he starts out active. He's running towards the bus. We see the nerdy kid who doesn't fit in trying to go to the class trip. On Iron Man, we see Tony Stark, the cocky billionaire. We see the start of these characters on their character transformation arcs, and as we see these characters, we see somebody we relate to, we see somebody we care about, and as we start to care about this person, that's what compels us to see this film to the end. And the big problem, again, with these Zack Snyder films is that we're not engaged. And one of the things that I'm glad about Patty Jenkins is that at least she was able to engage us. She immediately, after that weak sequence where they have the talking about the gods, she immediately jumps us right in to Diana, and that saves the film, because us seeing Diana in action, us seeing those Amazons in action, that was the turning point for the Wonder Woman film. And this is what DC, if they want to hope to really go back out here and compete again, they have to get back to active storytelling. You cannot have a passive model where you're just going to sit there and tell everybody, oh, this is this guy, and this is this guy. It was annoying for me with Suicide Squad. You're telling me about these characters instead of you showing me what makes these characters a threat and showing me why we need to put this squad of villains together. And everything was weak because of the passive storytelling. Now, when you have passive storytelling, weak, dark visuals that we cannot see anything, and overdone special effects, it's a hard to watch series of films. And again, I'm understanding why the DC Cinematic Universe failed, because when it came down to it, Warner Brothers was coming more out of emotion and desperation in the hopes to catch up with Marvel Studios, instead of focusing on craft like they did with Tim Burton's Batman or your Richard Donner's Superman. With both of those films, there was a focus on craft, there was a focus on characters, there was a focus on story primarily, and that's why those films last so long, and that's why they have resonated over the last 30, 40 years, because the story was primarily the main focus, the characters were rich and multidimensional, and that's not something I can say about those Zack Snyder films, which featured these paper-thin characters and absolutely next to no character development. When I look at these DC cinematic films, I see a series of forgettable films that were supposed to build up a universe, but eventually led to the end of a world for Warner Brothers, because after these three films, they had to literally end the DC cinematic universe, and I'm hoping that they can rebuild and focus on something a bit more solid, because it's clear to me that DC's got the characters, but what they need is a leader with a vision, and they need somebody there who understands comics, understands superheroes, and someone who will try to make superheroes fun, because if I believe they get somebody in there in a Warner Brothers who can make superheroes fun, then they could really give Marvel Studios the run for its money it desperately needs. If you'd like to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon by clicking the link in the description box. And if you want to try some of my SJS Direct publications like the ISIS series, the E-Steam series, the John Haynes series, the Temptation of John Haynes, and the Spinsterella trilogy, you may do so by clicking the link to Amazon.com. And I'm hoping you'll be there tomorrow when I launch the ISIS graphic novel Indiegogo. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.
Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited, ISIS, Imitation of Life. The Goddess Next Door helps a young black girl overcome racism during the era of Jim Crow in this Golden Age ISIS series adventure. Get ISIS, Imitation of Life in paperback and Kindle Unlimited today.